Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Leo on the 5th of February and, of course, all the other things that are happening around that particular time. Now, this full moon is called the snow moon in some cultures, and that's largely because, of course, in the northern parts of the globe, it's the snowiest month of the whole year. But I also like the fact that in the Algonquin nation and the Algonquin peoples, it's referred to as the groundhog moon. And if you remember that very funny, wonderful film, Groundhog Day, that centers on a special day, the 2nd of February, in which there's a kind of celebration of that day, and the groundhog emerges from its burrow, and if it sees its shadow, it gets scared and rushes back into its burrow, and if it doesn't see its shadow, remains outside. That's a signal that winter is virtually over. So we'll see just how true that is if we follow the celebration of February the 2nd. But also February the 2nd is Candlemas. And in the Christian faith, that has a lot to do with the purification of Mary, 6 weeks after the birth of Jesus Christ. And on that day in the Christian faith, not so much anymore. In fact, I don't think it is traditional anymore, but it was until a couple of decades ago. Then women were able to go back to church after the 6 weeks had passed since the birth of their child. So it's a day of purification. But in pagan religions, and we're looking perhaps specifically in the Celtic religion, we look at Imbolc. This is really a celebration of the light. In fact, the winter drawing to a close and spring to be the next kind of season, which is also a rather nice way of looking at this period of time. Now, the full moon itself, which we're going to look at in a minute, is in the sign of Leo, Sun in Aquarius, Moon in Leo, and I'm going to be taking you through that sign by sign so we can see the effects of that full moon, what areas of life we should be focusing on. But this full moon is also almost exactly square planet Uranus, that revolutionary planet, and I'm going to be leaving that till the end of my video to talk a little bit more about that, because it's very interesting in terms of how we view the planet Uranus, what we expect from it, and really, in a way, how we should be treating this period of the year, both in the sense of what we're looking at out on the world stage and also in our own lives. So let me go forward now and have a look at the full moon in terms of the astrology, the horoscope, and I'll take you through the significant kind of aspects there are at that particular time. Now, as you can see from this chart, I've set it for Iceland, Reykjavik, because I like to take new moons, full moons from different parts of the globe. And it seems, in light of this being the snow moon, that we're in the northernmost, snowiest countries of the world here. And as you can see, if we look at this, the picture here, we've got the moon rising over the ascendant. So the full moon will be seeable at this point because the sun will have set. And if we look at the opposite point of the zodiac, we see the moon at 1642 of Leo and the sun at 16, well, it says 41. That's just the way the calculation comes out. We can see the sun will have set. It is below the horizon. And of course, what we see there high overhead is the planet Uranus and also Mars, both of which are also in pride of place during this early part of February. Now, in fact, the exact Sun-Uranus square falls on the 4th of February, but it's hours, just a matter of hours before the full moon. And also on the 4th of February, Venus will be squaring Mars. So whenever we get 90-degree aspects in the astrology, we've got real dynamism going on. This is when we become aware of the influences, the astrological influences, and their impact tends to be much greater, more profound when we're looking at the hard aspects. That's the opposition, the square, the conjunctions give a much more powerful expression of whatever we're really looking at in the astrology. So also a few days later, and what we'll be applying, the aspect that we'll be applying at that time, is the Mercury-Pluto conjunction. If we look in our horoscope here, we can see Mercury at 22 degrees of Capricorn at the sort of 5 o'clock point in the circle. And you can see it's about 6 degrees away from Pluto on the 5th, but by the time we get to the 10th, it's there conjoined to Pluto. Now, this is a very interesting aspect because in March of this year, Pluto will be moving into Aquarius. It will slip back into Capricorn in early June, only to fully enter Aquarius in January of 2024. I am going to be talking on another video about the entry of Pluto into Aquarius and what it means, as well as Saturn into Pisces, which also happens next month. But to return to this idea of the Mercury-Pluto conjunction, this will be the penultimate time in the sign of Capricorn, Mercury will conjoin Pluto. It has an aura of finality about it, and I think especially if you're born to the end of the sign of Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, and Libra, then this Mercury-Pluto conjunction is very much, in your horoscope. And it does mean really confrontation at that point. And confrontation, in my mind, has more to do with facing something, warts and all, confronting the elephant in the living room. What is it that you don't want to look at? Well, what is it that you need to face full on? I think that has more to do with a Mercury-Pluto conjunction than the idea of confrontation in the sense of conflict and argument and upset and war and battles. Now, of course, we've got a lot of war and conflict in the world already, so we'll have some of that expression to bring to bear around this time. But in terms of our own lives, especially if you fall at the end of the signs I've just mentioned, then it is time to really look at a situation, warts and all, and say, you know what, I've got to deal with this now. And in some cases, I have to end it. It's a situation that can't go on, or it's something that I have to put mind, body, heart, and soul into to get it to manifest. We use a lot of depth-charged qualities in ourselves and in the nature of the situations we're dealing with when we get Pluto involved with a personal planet, of which Mercury is one. Now, that aspect will be applying at the time of the full moon as well. So it's part of our full moon picture. So always with a full moon, we have the theme of closure and completion. We say things are done and we get ready to move on to new things that are of interest to us. And I'll cover that, as I said, when we come to the individual signs. But I think this period of the year, which is very interesting, because if I go back to last year, and there was a full moon, 1st, 2nd of February last year in Leo, Sun in Aquarius, Moon in Leo. And I remembered considering that to be significant in regards to royal affairs. And, I felt at that time there would be hints of things to come. We just got through the Prince Andrew scandal, really. That was actually done and dusted in terms of payments made and, no more court cases as such. But also to me, this was very relevant in terms of the late Queen's health. And I felt very clearly that we would be looking at perhaps at the very last days, in a way, of her reign. Now, although it did go on and we had waited until September, A lot of the news that was coming out at that time really made it clear to all of us that she was becoming increasingly frail. So I'm also looking at this year, this February, this full moon, its connection to Uranus combined with the Mercury-Pluto conjunction as having an important effect or a precursor to events, especially royal events, that are going to be happening in the late April through to the mid to late May period. It's about a 6-week period from the 15th of April through to the end of May. And of course, you may remember that during that time, the 6th of May, we have the coronation of Prince Charles. But the preceding eclipse, that's a lunar eclipse, but the preceding eclipse is a solar eclipse, a new moon eclipse, and it is precisely square Pluto, and it is precisely plugged into Prince Charles's moon, which is 0 degrees of Taurus. So around this time, and this is where we get our precursor now, but we're really headed towards that mid to late April period and beyond, there are very significant developments in the royal family, particularly related to Prince Charles. I'll cover that a little bit more as we get close to the time. But as I said, keep your eyes open for all things royal, signs and signals as or around this time of the full moon. Another thing I want to mention here is if we look at Venus in Pisces, that's in a sort of 2 to 3 o'clock position. We see it at some distance from Neptune, about 11, 12 degrees, 11 degrees. And in point of fact, Venus will arrive conjoined to Neptune around Valentine's Day, just hours after Valentine's Day. Now, again, I'll be talking about that a little bit more on my next video, but suffice to say, it's something to think about now. A Venus-Neptune conjunction, is about romance and the divine at one level, but it's also about mystery, loss, confusion, rejection. We always get opposites, there's negative, positive with any single aspect. And I think we've got Pisces in the front line here. And then we have the opposite sign, Virgo, and the squared signs, Gemini and Sagittarius. So if you belong to these signs and you're already thinking about Valentine's Day, remember this is going to be pretty important for you in the sense of dreams coming true or perhaps dreams being shattered. But again, I'm going to talk about that on my next video. So I'm going to come away from that point and get on straight away with how this full moon is sign by sign. So first of all, let's look at Leo. This is the only full moon this year in your sign. And I always say about a full moon in your sign, you are empowered. And this is because the moon represents emotions. It represents feelings. It has a lot to do with the inner realm. And we're empowered in the sense that we harness that full moon. I don't want to use the word energy, but do instead of something else, to the sun, which is the solar power. This is solar force. So we get a very, very powerful kind of effect for you, Leo, at the time of this full moon. And again, let's look at closure and completion. We're looking at the 7th house. The sun is moving through the 7th house of your solar chart. So we are in the region of relationships anyway, and will continue to be so right through until the 19th of February. So this full moon marks the completion of a cycle. And you may want to go back to the 27th of July, 2022, to where this particular cycle began. As I always say, there's a kind of bookend situation going on with the new moon in a sign and then the full moon. And some of these things relate to events that just happened. They came out of the blue, and you can see now they are reaching their denouement. It's time for closure, or you're just closing off a stage and it's moving into a new kind of expression of itself. And this is particularly so to do with relationships. So if you formed a relationship, a romance, or a business relationship around about the late July period, early August period, you're reaching a point at which you're going to be assessing that relationship. You know, is it a goer, or is it now revealing its shortfall? And do we need to close that off? I think always with the sun moving through the 7th house, which, as I said, is going to go on right through until the 19th of February, it is a time to sort of listen and learn from other people. You're a fire sign, a dynamic sign. You're very proactive, fiery, and so you are initiating. Whereas, you know, this is a period of time to wait and see what others have to say, what others have to do, what others can bring to the table. So just as a general rule of thumb, you will be better waiting and seeing, giving airspace and the stage to other people, because that way you'll be able to figure out how you want to use your empowering full moon in order to have an effect on relationships in particular, and situations in general. When we come to Aquarius, the sun is in your sign, so it's in the 1st house, and the moon is in your 7th house. Now, of course, it's only going to be in your 7th house for 2 or 3 days, so this is transient. So it's only the time of the full moon and what it sets in place in terms of the following 14 days of the waxing cycle that this is a decisive moment for a relationship. Are you ready to commit? Or are you ready to say, no, thank you, it's done? It is an ending, always, with a full moon. We tie things up, put them in a package, and we either put that package in the depository of history, or we say, no, we move forward, taking elements and parts of the journey we've already been on, but we go forward with it. And of course, the idea of a full moon here is also union. So some Aquarians will be celebrating a union or the forthcoming union. You've got an engagement or a wedding coming up, or a very special anniversary. And that's what this full moon is signaling. Now, sometimes, of course, a full moon will bring matters to a head. So if you've got some kind of issue with another person, or even a company or a group, then it's going to reach its climax at the full moon. And given that that full moon is square Uranus, it means there can be some very unexpected results from conversations, negotiations, situations that involve you and another person, or you and a company, institution. So it's both a time, again, of being able to have a breakthrough in those conversations, discussions, and, you know, relationships, or whether it's saying, you know, this is it, we're done, and quite abruptly and suddenly. But again, although I looked at Leo and talked about this full moon is very empowering, that's empowering over the time of the full moon. Whereas for you, Aquarius, you've got the sun moving through your house. It's through your sign. It is birthday time. So in many ways, the solar force is with you. The initiating force is with you. If we come to Scorpio, we've got Scorpio, the moon for you is in the 10th house. So we're in the area of career, life direction, your role in life. Again, it's transitory because the moon is only going to be going through here for 3 days, although it sets a pattern that then continues for another couple of weeks till we get to the new moon. So this often is a point at which you may feel that there's an issue regarding your work situation, your job, your life out in the world versus your private life and your home life. Now, it is important that we get the balance right. And with the sun moving through the 4th house, the main accent right through until February the 19th is about home, family, property matters, things to do with your general stability, security, your sense of being at home. And with a full moon here, it says, just how much is needed to create a balance between these areas of life. So the situations that are illuminated are there to show you what's incompatible with that sense of balance between these two areas of life. It may also be for some of you that you really are right up on, in the forefront of things around the time of this full moon. Maybe that you are taking a leading role in something, or that events that are happening really push you to the forefront. But remember, we've got Uranus in tow. And when we think Scorpio, about the moon in the 10th, sun in the 4th, Uranus is in the 7th. So any kind of breakthrough or unexpected events tend to relate to other people in your life. If we come to Taurus, we've got the reverse. We have the sun moving through the 10th house. So, in the last week or so, moving through to the 19th of February, there's a strong accent on getting your material world in shape. So a lot of material things to attend to. Of course, there have been, as often as we draw to the end of January, there are taxes to be filed and all those kind of things that have to do with our financial world and our material world. And we do make quite a lot of decisions about what we're going to do in the year, how we're going to go forward. And so this full moon is really about setting something in cement, sealing it, saying, okay, this is where we're at. So we've made certain decisions now related to your career or to the material aspects of your existence. And you're saying, yes, done. Tick the box, we're done. But remember, where is Uranus? Uranus is in the first house, it's in your sign. So it may be that you have a sudden awakening and think, you know what? I've got to do this, I've got to do that, or I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. So that you are the person experiencing a kind of awakening around this time of the full moon, which puts you in charge of changing the map in some way. But remember again that the moon is in the 4th house, transitory for these 3 days. So this might bring an end to a property matter. Maybe it's a sale or a purchase, or maybe there's been something in regard to the family and it's been going this way and that. And finally, you've got to a conclusion. If we move now to the mutable signs, we'll start with Pisces. Now, for you, Pisces, the full moon, sun in the 12th, moon in the 6th house. So we're on this axis of, well, we call it health and well-being, but that's just the traditional kind of labels to this house. These houses is much more than that. The idea that there are conclusions to be drawn, endings to be made, assessments to be dealt with, can relate to things to do with the way you work and the workplace itself, but it can also be to do with your health, so that we're looking at things that require addressing, require knocking on the head and dealing with, putting away, or the fact that something that you have been troubled by, and maybe you've put off dealing with it because you have so many other things to do. Around the time of the full moon, you're much more likely to be aware, you know what, I need to get this old injury sorted. I need to get these symptoms attended to. So it is a time when health and well-being are important. They are in the forefront. And there's this idea that you're bringing matters to a conclusion. But this area of the chart, the 12th house and the 6th house, a lot to do with your purpose in life, the sense of a mission. So there is an aspect of service here as well. And so it may be that you reach a conclusion in terms of what it is you're trying to find as a sense of purpose in something. It's taken you until this point to really close it and say, you know what, I'm there. I understand what this is all about. And I am ready to sort of embrace, if you like, my purpose. There are many other things that we can attach to this full moon, but certainly on the 5th itself, remember, we've got Uranus involved as well. So there may be surprising events around this time that bring all the sorts of things that I've talked about right into the forefront in quite a surprising way. If we look at Virgo, we've got the opposite. So we have the moon in the 12th house, we have the sun in the 6th. So the extended period from the 21st of January, the 20th of January, right through to the 19th of February, has been concerned with 6th house matters. And in the 6th house, I think it maybe the last video I had, I talked about the 6th house being what I call the repair shop. We do a lot of repair in the 6th house. So with the sun moving through the 6th house, we have this idea that a lot of matters are being dealt with and being sorted and resolved. And this can be anything in life, but it may be specifically to do with your health and to do with work-related matters and life in general. The idea of repair is a long period. Well, if you call a month a long period. But when we look at the full moon, which is exact on the 5th of February, but really in play with the moon in that sign for 3 days, this marks a certain peak of what I'm talking about. So things that require addressing are going to be at a peak at this time. Now, you might be looking at a breakthrough, or you might be looking at things breaking down at this time. Either way, they need dealing with in a kind of workman-like fashion. Let's use our kind of Virgo, Pisces, 6, 12 words attached to this area of the chart and think of it as something that we should be managing. But as with all full moons, closure and completion is the theme. And maybe with Uranus attached, we're looking at something unexpected that brings about that closure and completion. If we come to Gemini, we have the sun in the 9th house and the moon in the 3rd house. And we're on the axis of communication. So this brings into the foreground things to do with information. So with the sun moving through the 9th house, again, for a month's period until the 19th of February, this is a time when we're doing a lot of seeking. We're seeking information. We're looking further down the line, both in terms of time and also in space. So you may be looking at holiday plans, or you may be in discussion with or thinking about people who are far away, or opportunities that really have an international kind of aspect to them. That's the sun's movement through this period. So we get the full moon and we get a conclusion. So maybe you've been forging plans. You've been trying to figure out when you're going to make a journey. You've been trying to figure out with a certain application to study, maybe even an exam, for instance, or a test, or some kind of learning curve. This full moon ends that and says, we're done. That's finished now. And shortly thereafter, in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be a new phase of operations. But the full moon is also the end of a journey. So yes, it may be that you're traveling and the journey is at an end and you've either gone somewhere or you're coming back from it. But of course, a journey has much greater implications when we think of the experiences we have. And so if there is just a neat little catchphrase for this particular full moon for you, Gemini, it will be the idea that you are at the end of a journey. And that means reflection and all sorts of things being wrapped up in preparation for the next. When we come to Sagittarius, we're looking at the moon in the 9th and the sun in the 3rd. So we're still on this axis of communication, information, and learning. But again, for you, we've got the sun moving through the 3rd. So this is a period when there's a lot of local knowledge, community knowledge, things that are happening in your immediate vicinity. They're close at hand. So it may be that you're dealing with organizations that are close to home, your neighborhood. There are things that need to be brought together, understood, and learnt. And they're sort of, part of a kind of fabric of communication that you're going to be able to use, not necessarily in everyday life. It can be bigger than that, but it is about collecting information. So this full moon may say, wow, something coming out of the woodwork now is absolutely eye-opening, jaw-dropping information, because we have Uranus mixed into that full moon. Does it mean that something that you've been working on and you've been expecting to have some results with comes in and it's totally different from what you expect? And I certainly think when we look at this Sagittarius, that this full moon on the communication axis of travel as well, it is about changing your perspective. You know, when we change our outlook and we change our perspective, outcomes change. And so a lot of things going on this time in early February are all about things coming out of the woodwork, and that making a change in how you look at certain situations and certain people. And of course, the full moon marks the apex of all, not the apex, the pinpoint, the tipping point of all that. If we move on now to the cardinal signs, then we're going to start with Libra. And the full moon for you falls in the 11th house, the sun in the 5th house. And this is the axis of collaboration and creativity. So it's an important full moon because it marks the end of a gestation period. Now, a gestation period, in the most often sense that we understand it, is the idea of pregnancy and childbirth. It takes 9 months of a gestation period to go from conception to birth. That is a real gestation period. But there are other things that have a gestation period, a period of preparation and development until that's ready to be a finished piece. And this can apply to a project, especially a creative project. It can apply to a romance. It can apply to many, many aspects of one's existence. But if we keep the themes of creativity and collaboration at the forefront of our minds, we know what we're really dealing with. Full moons close things off. So it may be that a period of preparation is now over and you're ready to move on to the next stage of the proceedings, or you're ready to say, all this preparation, all this development, we're now at this full moon, and you know what? It's really done. It's completed. There is no more I have to do here. But of course, that can apply to a romance, for instance, and maybe if it's been taking place for 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, particularly that 6-month period because of the new moon in Leo at that time, it may be time to say, you know, this is the end of the road. It doesn't have what it takes to be something that will go on years and years ahead. It's done. It's done its time. But I think if we just think loosely about the important aspect, well, of everything astrologically, you know, I do these videos twice a month, once at new moon, once at full moon, although we're talking always about a lot of other things. We can see that there's a big cycle of endings and beginnings that's going on all the time. Sometimes it's bigger than at others, and that's often when a full moon or something else playing into that full moon is really in your natal chart. It's on the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, the IC, so it's very, very personal. You've got something happening big time. And that will vary from sign to sign, and in your case, Libra to Libra. But it is a good time to sew things up and to complete a process. And the area of collaboration is where we're focused, certainly around the time of the full moon. Your cooperation and collaboration with another person or a group. And there's both this sense of accomplishment, but also the sense that things have gone as far as they can. With Aries, we've got the opposite. We've got the sun moving through the 11th house. So really right through until February the 19th, there is a strong accent on friendship and teamwork, collaboration, on humanitarian kind of activities. whether you're very much involved in all the sorts of things that are going on with climate change and recycling and getting together with like-minded people with a purpose to make things better for humanity, and maybe quite a kind of accent on that generally, you're much more likely to respond to what's going on in a humanitarian sense, make it active. But I think also for you, Aries, just thinking about the sun coming through the 11th house, you're a very independent sign. You are a sign that really likes to do things on your own. You have your own unique ideas about things. You're very forthright and fearless. And sometimes working in a team is quite hard. It's not that you don't love people or necessarily working with people. It's just that you are such a forceful individual that sometimes other people feel they can't work with you. So maybe at this full moon, if you are in a current collaboration, whether it's to do with business and work or whether it's something more social, that there's a bit of a hiatus, that maybe you haven't got agreement, maybe there is conflict, maybe even upset regarding a social arrangement or a business plan. And really, is it over? Is it that you can't go any further because there's so many disparate views and opinions and you feel you can't work with others on this? It's up to you. It's going to be different from Aries to Aries. I think the focus really, really is on this idea of how much needs to be sacrificed in regards to you, your ego, and with other people. How much of you do you have to take a back step in favor of the group as a whole? Only you can answer that. But that's what we're looking at around this full moon. Now, if we come to Capricorn, then we are looking at the full moon itself in the 8th house. We're looking at the sun in the 2nd house. So we're in the kind of financial area of life. It's more than that. It's more about, well, in the sense of where the sun is moving through your 2nd house, it is about income. It is about building and creating stability and putting a roof over your head and getting your financial world straight. That's what the sun's passage through this area is doing over the course of 30 days. Whereas when we have the full moon, we've got a 3-day event here, which is bringing things to a head. So that if there are financial worries, they're going to be at a pitch around the time of the full moon. But at the same time, it could be a very good period to sign a contract and to complete an agreement. We're looking at these same words, closure and completion, aren't we? And so you can have an ending, that's it, there's no more crisis point. Or you can have this idea that things are resolved, they're done, we've got something in a neat little box, and here we are. But the moon is in the 8th house. So we're looking at other people's participation in this. Yeah, ultimately, it is down to us how we handle our money, how we look at our material world, what is, our value to other people, how is our self-esteem doing. These are matters we're directly involved with and in control of. Throw a full moon in there, and you've got other people's impact on all of that. So it's a time when other people influence our financial affairs, financial organizations, financial institutions, banks, all of those kind of things, credit card companies. So you may be taking out new contracts with these kinds of institutions, or it may be that they're at an end. Hopefully, how wonderful, you're at the end of a mortgage, you're done, no more mortgage payments. But it can also be, as I said earlier, a little bit of a crisis. So other people are bringing this to a crisis point, and you are not exactly in the palm of other people, but you are certainly going to have to listen to their offers and, their opinions, and addressing that and accepting it, negotiating with it according to where you are. So think positively on the one hand of getting something completed as far as finances go. It's done, it's over, fantastic, we have it in place. Or things coming to a head and really some very radical action that needs to be dealt with. And with Uranus in that mix, Capricorn, we're looking at perhaps unexpected things, maybe even technology playing a part here. And as you know, in the middle of January, we did have a lot of problems with computers and software and outages and hacking and all of that. So I would suggest, Capricorn, that you do look carefully at any transaction that involves online matters or computer technology, because this could be something that does interfere with a smooth transaction. Last but not least, we come to Cancer. We have the reverse. The sun is moving through your 8th house. So on the full moon itself, the 5th of February, we've got the financial axis involved, the moon in the 2nd house, and of course the sun and the moon squaring Uranus. So we're bringing that idea of random, unpredictable, unexpected. So something unexpected, bringing something to a crunch point. Is it a relationship, an intimate relationship that reaches a crunch point now? Is it a financial relationship that reaches a crunch point? Is it that now something changes in regard to a settlement or an inheritance or some kind of financial deal? Is suddenly something changed randomly? These are all possibilities to play with. But as the sun wends its way through the 8th house, right up until the 19th of February, you want to be thinking in terms of your connection with other people in regards to finance. It's an important time to recognize how much people have an effect on your financial affairs. In a way, it's what you receive from other people. So it's what they're prepared to give you and whether you can accept those terms. And we look at that in an intimate setting as well, because this area is the house or the area of financial and emotional and sexual exchange. So this full moon will bring an emotional sexual matter to a tipping point. Is it time to say, I'm all in? I'm, open to reciprocity and fully to this relationship at a deep and profound level? Or is it that I'm thinking, oh, this is enough. I've reached this point where this is no longer something I'm comfortable with, I'm happy with, that I really, really see continuing. So that takes us all the way through the zodiac, looking at the broad effects of a full moon and taking into consideration the planet Uranus. And I decided that I wanted to sort of conclude by looking a little bit more at the effect of Uranus. Now, the first thing I want to look at is the idea that the outer planets, well, actually, I would include Saturn as well. So we're talking about Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They really become personalized, and we feel their effects in our lives when we have the personal planets hooking up to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, when they connect with the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, our personal planets. Other than that, they're kind of rather distant from us, and they don't have a great deal of meaning in our lives. So to have this full moon squaring Uranus, it's bringing Uranus into the general pattern of life globally, individually. But if that full moon connects with your chart and with Uranus, and that means you've got something around 15 degrees of the fixed signs, which means you're Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo, and born around the 5th of May, of August, of November, and February, whatever sign you are fits into that 5th, then that's, this whole Uranus full moon effect is really, really strong. Now, I want to elaborate on this a little bit more, specifically to do with Uranus, because Uranus has many meanings. It isn't just one thing. It's neither good nor is it bad. It is what it is. It represents liberation, awakenings, breakthroughs. We take leaps forward with Uranus. But we also have the opposite of that. We have breakdowns, revolution, conflict, and we also have sudden endings. So it's possible to have that Uranus effect in more than one area of life at the same time. So that in one area of life, you're experiencing a breakthrough, a feeling that suddenly everything is changed, but in a good way. And yet in another way, there's a lot of upset. And sometimes, even when we experience a breakthrough, it does cause upset. So we need to remember that Uranus as a principle is, as I just said, neither good nor bad. It is what it is. And its principle is really diversity. It's going to change things up. It's going to show you something you didn't expect. There are going to be reversals and developments that come out of thin air. And when something happens when we're not expecting it, we normally want to reject it. We normally don't like it. When we're prepared for something, we can look at it and see its positive aspects of change and growth, its progressive aspects. It takes time. But the other thing that I think I want to point out at this point, and I do mention it sometimes in my Friday Bite or in some of my other writings, that we can get sort of caught up in the idea that if Uranus is making a harmonious aspect to the personal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, a trine, a sextile, a quintile, that essentially all the good things about Uranus are going to be brought out. No, that's not the case. Even on a trine, a sextile, a quintile, a biquintile, we've got Uranus as an entity relating to our Sun, Moon, whatever it is, certain part of our horoscope. And we must prepare also to be shaken and stirred, because that's the effect of Uranus. The other thing about Uranus is that it is very predictable in the sense that events do tend to happen at the time. Now, sometimes with Pluto or Saturn or Neptune in particular, it's all very fudgy. You know, you can be, a couple of weeks, 10 days, 8 days, where what we expect from that planet to be manifest. But with Uranus, it's pretty well on the day, which is why I think we can use this full moon as a very good experiment as to, is this really a point where everything suddenly blew up or suddenly came right? We have those two extreme opposites we're playing with. I certainly think, when I go back to what I said at the beginning of this video, the idea that the royal family, the coronation in particular, things to do with that. Remember, we have Regulus, the fixed star, which is to do with royalty, at 29 degrees of Leo. So in this space of time, just before the sun moves into Pisces, 18th or around that time, the sun will be opposed to Regulus. We get some kind of development linked to royalty, and I talked about that in the context of last year. But again, let's watch this for this year. So in many ways too, I want to look at the situation with Russia and with Ukraine. I suspect things in this period that I'm talking about to take a major turn. Now, I can't tell you what that major turn is because, which side are you on? I mean, if things go well for Russia, that's a Uranian breakthrough. And for Ukraine, it's a major upset. Whereas if you are maybe Ukrainian and there's a breakthrough, then for Russia, it's all very upsetting. But I would say that we're going to see some very important developments regarding this war of attrition in and around this time of the full moon in Aquarius. So this has been a sort of different video, hasn't it? I mean, normally, you know, I'll probably talk about things about, you know, how to manifest things in our lives and the purpose of things, the meaning behind things. Whereas I seem to have been on this one just a little bit more focused on what's going on with the changes uh, that are going to happen in 2023, and February being a month where we may get a real idea of that. So thank you for watching, and most of all, thank you for all your comments. I have to say that when I read some of your comments for this last video, which was the new moon in Aquarius, it actually brought tears to my eyes. And I want to say thank you very much. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. So see you next time when we'll be discussing Valentine's Day, the arrival of Saturn into Pisces and Pluto into Aquarius. Bye for now.